Is now that it's centered, is I'm going to go ahead and open up the center, put a hole in the center. And again, I'm not going to do anything until the clay's spinning. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to bring it in my hands. I'm not going to do anything. I do have my sponge in my hand because at this next point I need to have potentially extra water. And so having it in my hand is really helpful. So I'm going to take my left thumb and I'm going to put this right in the center. And then with my right hand on top, I'm going to push this down. So right now as I'm doing this, all my left thumb is doing is standing still or holding still. My goal is for it to just be a tool while my right hand is actually what's using the force this down. Okay. So if you can see the inside there, now I have this kind of, almost like bowl-like shape, which is okay. It's not what we want, but it's kind of part of the process. So our walls are going to be about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. Somewhere in that range. Even's more important than where that thickness is inside of that range. So first thing I need to do is see how thick my bottom is. Because if this gets too thick or too thin, well, if it's too thin, it's going to crack and be cut out. If it's too thick, it's going to crack. So we really want to be nice and even, again, 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to stab my needle tool right into the lowest part of the clay. And then I'm going to take one of my fingers and slide this down the needle tool shaft until I hit the clay. And now I can pull it out, and that is how thick my bottom is. So that's way too thick still. I mean, that's closer to 3/4 of an inch. So again, I'm going to put my left thumb, get a little bit more water, left thumb down on the bottom and press down with my right hand. All right, so that's a much more appropriate thickness. All right, so my next step is right now I have this kind of V-shaped flower pot shape. Again, we want a flat bottom. Right now my flat bottom is only about 1 inch wide. So I'm gonna make this wider. So to do that, I'm gonna put my left hand back where it was while I was centering. But I'm not really gonna push any pressure on the clay. I'm more there just to kind of coddle it. So I'm gonna make sure there's enough water on it to make sure I'm lubricated. And then I'm going to use my middle finger and my ring finger and place that at the bottom of that kind of slope where it starts to flatten out. And I'm going to take those two fingers and drag them across the bottom of the clay towards my left palm. And just one firm kind of smooth motion. So let me get the water out of there. And so now we have a much wider open bottom. We're right at about 3 inches. And so that's good. So I've got the opening that I want. I said we want these to be about a minimum of 3 inches wide. And so the bottom's where you start that. If we make this wider now, the whole cylinder is going to have to be wider. If we make it too narrow, well, it doesn't matter because it's under 3 inches. But if it's less than 3 inches, now we can make it wider, but just by opening it up more. Otherwise, it's too late. You can't. Once you start throwing the cylinder, you can't make it wider at the bottom. So if you can see, and I think you can, the bottom of this, interior of this, is not flat. There's a low spot, a high spot, a low spot, another high spot, and a low spot. And so our goal is, like I said, to make this flat. One, aesthetically, that looks good. This doesn't look good. But also, clay's soft. You've noticed with things, clay doesn't always like to do what we want it to do. If we just leave this like this, it's probably going to crack. And so we need to compress it to make it not want to crack. So compress it, smooth it out. And if I don't do this now, when I have a cylinder that's 6 inches tall, I'm not going to be able to reach my tool down in there to do that effectively. So I'm going to use my wooden rib tool. And I'm going to use this shorter side. I'm going to use the shorter side. And I'm going to place this right at, again, think about the clock face. I'm going to place it right at 3 o'clock. And when I do that, I'm going to point this pointed end towards me. And what that's going to allow to do is going to allow the clay to smoothly go underneath it. Think about like a nice spatula spreading something. It's just going to smooth right to it. My tool's not going to move. The tool stays firm at 3 o'clock. The clay moves into it. If I hold it straight up and down or point it away from me, it's going to start digging clay out, and that's bad. So this is one of those things where compressing this is like, necessarily you can't really overdo it, but I oftentimes see people doing it too much. It's one of those where I'm just going to, again, start the wheel. I've got water in here and I've got this wet. I'm going to come to 3 o'clock and then just firmly press this down until I see it go flat. So 2 things have happened. 1, now my inside is nice and flat and smooth. 2, the benefit of this rib is that this 90-degree angle has made a mark right inside of there. And that's going to be really helpful when I start pulling here in a second. So this is compressed, and I've got about 3 inches of span or width in there. And so this is good. If this isn't 3 inches or more at this point, you need to open it up more. You need to flatten it out more. If you start getting this really small bottom that has kind of like a slope upwards, it's not going to count. It needs to be big and flat. And it'll make sense what I just said as you start doing it. I tell you it's wrong. So don't worry. I'm here for that.